today we have Kelly Fonner wrapping up our season this year. She's going to give us some insights and go through some information about what's in those archives anyways. So Kelly, I am going to stop sharing and hand it over to you.
All right. Well, welcome everybody. I'm going to grab the screen here. Yeah, not the one I expected. Doesn't that happen all the time?
We forgot to say the tech prayer.
Yeah. Eventually we get there. So welcome here for our last session in the 24-25 of Echo Voices. My name's Kelly Fonner. I do training and consulting in educational and assistive technology. Chandra's going to be jumping in here. This is part of our presentation that we did last month at the conference in Salem. And then part of it is the pulling together of all the things that have happened in Echo Voices since 2019. I think, and Deb will correct us if I've got any of the dates and things wrong for sure. So what we want to do here with you in our time together is go through what's happened in Echo Voices and all of that time, specifically this year. And the last 2 years, we've had this grand focus on feature matching and looking at products and companies. And prior to that, there was a big focus on the process of assessment and implementation and integrating AAC into the lives of the students that we serve that need and use AAC. And so we'll also put a bit of the feature matching presentation that we did last month there, but we really want to hear from you about what topics, what products. We've kind of always at this point of the year, we don't really have something planned yet. Know if there's a plan for next year yet, because it's about what you're looking for. So when we talk about this group of kids that are individuals that need and or use augmentative and alternative communication, we find there's a lot of variation. It isn't just individuals that need to use an alternative means to communicate all the time. We have a large group of our students that we serve that it is the augmentative side of communication, that it augments their natural voice, it augments their sign language and all the other modalities that they might be using and use. We'll find that there is a group of people that fit soundly into this is their main modality of communication. We have some people that use AAC or look to AAC because of physical challenges. We have people that look at it because of they have like a severe speech motor impairment. For some individuals, it's the language comprehension part. If you've heard some of my presentations in early childhood, one of the ones that I did at the conference this year was about my time in early childhood, where I had in a period of time over 30 kids that had AAC as a part of their services and supplemental aids. But by the time they left preschool, they were using their own natural speaking voice. And so we do have a population of individuals that AAC helps them with the developmental process of communication. And so we really try to promote getting started as early as possible. And we know that AAC encompasses lots of different tools, from things we use for voice amplification, that we use objects, we might use different types of scanners, we might use low-tech eye gaze frames, and all the different types of low-tech things that you use, cards, books, one-page communication, four boards, those types of things. But then we have this whole other world of the mumbo-jumbo language of AAC. And that's really what we've been trying to tackle these last 2 years, where we've had companies, representatives present on their line of products, whether they were dedicated devices, those, the box is made to be an AAC communication system. It's dedicated to that. Or also the companies that have tablet-based AAC apps that we call non-dedicated systems, because that tablet can be something else. But for many of our students, it is their communication system. So we've been working with the manufacturer reps to get presentations to talk about the different features that they had. So we've been looking at, what are the kinds of things that we might want in an AAC system? Not that there is any one ideal system. The manufacturers think that there is, but, we have to look as we are choosing systems maybe for a school-wide AAC, integrated approach, and as we look at that individual assessment. So we want to make sure that we're looking at AAC systems that foster growth, right? That don't restrict who we can and can't talk to, because some people won't understand it. We want to make sure that we're looking for systems that people can use in multiple environments and that they can talk about multiple things. And of course, especially for those of us that are working with language and language development, which we should always have an eye on, we want to make sure that the system isn't so static that it only says the things that somebody knows how to say, but it also fosters that growth, and then there's flexibility for tomorrow's language. So we know that when we talk about feature matching, we're looking at these three big aspects of what is that human. We often look at it as the human technology interface, right? That what does that human need? And what do they need communication-wise? So those bubbles on the right represent that expressive communication piece. We need to have not just the speech output, but we need to build language. We need to be able to talk about multiple topics with multiple different partners. And we also are growing their pragmatics and how they communicate in those different environments. So we look at those environmental expectations of what systems, so if I have multiple languages spoken in a household, that's a feature that we talk about. And we've had presenters in the past talk about multiple languages and how we look at that. And that's why we're going to review what some of our presenters have focused on in the past. So that brings us to the Echo Voices. So I'm just going to let Chandra do her thing here and just once again, give you the overview. You're here, so you kind of know what it is, but go for it, Chandra.
So, Echo Voices. This has been a long-running program, and we do intend to continue it forward. The really, really important bit is that we hear from you guys. That's the thing that I really need to, I want to hammer in, is that we need to hear from you, because we are here. We exist to serve you guys. So if you guys have a topic that you want to see in the future, please let us know. Or if you have a speaker that you want to hear from, let me know. So we have bi-monthly presentations typically, and we do the first and third Wednesday mornings of the month, and I believe it's been that way pretty much across the board. Kelly, am I right? Yeah, that's been.
Yeah, pretty much so. Yes.
Yeah. So
It has, and we polled to see when people were available, and most people thought that 8 a.m. on Wednesdays, people didn't want to see them. So I know it doesn't fit for everybody, but that's where we started, and that's why we record them, and we appreciate it when people can join us.
Thank you.
Yeah, the recordings are really valuable.
Yes, so we have those recordings in multiple places, and most recently I have been putting them in YouTube. Those links will not break. So if you want to see a recording that's in YouTube, no worries, you can go to those. If I don't get something, if you see something in the archives that is not up on YouTube, especially during this transition period, let me know. I will get it up there if I can. And we did change platforms to this new iEcho platform most recently, and I know we had a little bit of growing pains, but I think we've mostly worked through it. People are mostly used to Zoom, and so we're still using Zoom. But we do have all of those handouts also living in that iEcho platform. So if you participated this year and last year, you will still be able to get those handouts in the iEcho platform. Those links will also not break. So happy day.
Right. So people are putting in chat how long they've participated in Echo. And I know that we have a lot of first year people and we have people that have been around. So we're gonna talk now about what you can find on that YouTube channel. So as I mentioned, over the last 2 years, we've been focusing on products, AAC products, and this whole feature matching process. So we kind of went through and just alphabetized companies. So I didn't realize how many AAC companies start with the letter A until I did this, by the way. And so we've had Adaptivation talk with us in the winter this year about their low-tech adaptations. And the other thing, the nice thing that I like about the presentation that they did is that they don't just talk about their products, but the implementation of it and how people are using it. Lori shows lots of different examples of how they introduce AAC through low tech and move people to kind of that mid-tech range. We've had Assistaware talk about their technology, and especially as the new tools of ProLocal Coach came out, and gave their perspective on using just-in-time training as people are learning to use something, having the support right there where you need it. So Barbara and Pam talked about parent support as well as educator and client support.
And lots of data. This particular software had a lot of data tools in it.
So they talked about how you can use that language activity monitor and pull that information out. So that's a nice session to go back and if you've got ProLocal users with that. More recently, just here in the spring, Joni and John from Attainment talked about their products, and we got a first look at something that's coming brand new. So you can always pipe into that. And they went through the basic, all the Go Talks and the versions of the Go Talks and gave some examples of the low tech things, but then also focused on what's new and what's coming. John talked about the software and how they've been making changes over time to pretty much have a Go Talk all in one with the Go Talk Connect. So a little preview of that if you haven't seen that at any conferences or anywhere yet. Avaz, is one of those companies that here in the U.S., it's a company out of India, but here in the U.S. has very dedicated Avaz users. And so with their software that runs on tablets and on phones, Narayan talked about how they look at their vocabulary and how they look at the different supports that they have as well. They have some coaching supports and other software programs to help families and individuals learn to use their tools. So we always appreciate that the companies that talk about the implementation side and not just the product and like feature by feature kind of salesy job. We try and get them to focus on that. We've had a couple presentation from Forbes. And as Forbes has, Cough Drop has been merged into the Forbes company. So we've had a concentrated presentation just on Cough Drop, where Jill talked about that and all the features of Cough Drop and the information that you can get from there and all the different ways in which people share. And Oregon is a large cough drop using population. As I look around the country at places that have been using that particular product. Bridget was one of our very first presenters that focused on a product line, and she kind of went through all of the products. One of the questions that we're interested in is, do you have interest? Are you in need of updates? So, for example, all of these companies that presented, if they presented 2 years ago, we know that there's new things that have happened. And so are you interested in presentations from some of these companies like Frankie Romick or Toby Dynavox so that they can give you the update on their newest tools? Or are you getting that information in other places? We don't need to repeat here what you might have access to elsewhere. One of the newer companies, iRespond, that does a lot with eye gaze, spoke here in the winter time, and Hannah went through different apps, their different features of their eye gaze systems, and did a lot of nice answering of questions about how they look at eye gaze and teaching eye gaze, not just to the consumer, but to the people who serve them as well. And I'll just let Chandra jump in whenever. I know that you were really into the iRespond.
Yeah. My favorite part about this, because they gave us something that nobody else had given us, and that was a really solid list of accessible apps that worked with eye gaze, because that was like one of my number one requests was, what can I use this with? So yes, that and there were materials, and it was wonderful. That was my favorite. It solved problems for me.
Well, that's one of the things we tried to do this year. Last year, in the 2023-24 school year, we focused on a lot of the well-known companies, the major manufacturers. And then this year, we tried to fill in the gaps with some specialty things. So, for example, with iRespond, and then also with Lingraphia. Lingraphia is a company that's been around for a while, but they were more known to be in the adult services world, and very static vocabulary. And they've had some changes to their system over the last couple of years. So it was nice to have Sarah here to talk about what's going on with Lingraphia, what products are still static and very easy to use, and then what are they doing with the more open-ended products, and as they look at teenagers, young adults, and looking at even elementary age students using their tools. So they approach things more from a dedicated tool way, and then looking at what people might be doing with the flexibility of some of their apps within that. Of course, we've had Frankie Romick's been one of the big speakers. Jason's been with us a couple of times. One time where he's focused on the hardware. So what were all of the features of products, the access of products, and then he at another time focused on the software that's within their products. So looking at all of the products that have been built off of MinSpeak and Unity, and all the products that are built off of TouchChat. So looking at that and very much looking at it as a feature match perspective. We're going to take a look at the feature match matrix here and in a couple of slides, and you'll see that he's done a really nice job at filling that information out for their different products that they carry.
And then just a little preview for the future maybe is that Iris Bond's camera and PRC's hardware have kind of married up, and Jason is getting all up to date on that sort of thing. So as at some point they will come back to us and provide some training on their eye gaze, dedicated eye gaze. Well, it's an iPad with their software and the whole case. And anyway, so just a little sneak peek into the future.
Yeah, you'll hear the term Versa. In fact, Prenke Romic's doing some presentations this month and next on this their new this new merger. Jumping off at the beginning of this school year was School Health. School Health holds the license for AbleNet. So they are the United States provider of the AbleNet hardware products. So like the Big Macs, the Little Macs, all of those step-by-steps, the Quick Talkers, all of those dedicated devices and the switch lines from AbleNet are through School Health. And Dr. Ray did a really fantastic job at talking about the application of it, not just going through what those tools are, because they know a lot of people know those tools, but talked about the importance of using low-tech and mid-tech AAC tools in classrooms to get kids ready and to get them started and to do training with that. So we had a good time with Dr. Ray.
And he just provided some really solid, practical, this is how you can do this. And that's always so much fun. Sometimes we focus on the tool itself and how cool and shiny it is, or the why we're using it, and we forget about the practical part. And he just brought that home so well. I love Dr. Ray.
It's really good when we have the manufacturers that can relate their products to the real world. We've had several presentations with people from SmartBox, especially as SmartBox and Talk to Me Technologies merged. So trying to get coverage of their grid software that goes into so many different platforms. And then taking a look at their eye gaze and their eye gaze software programs like like the Look Lab and those other products. And then they did a return engagement talking about some of the new pragmatic vocabulary with VocaChat, and to go through their super core and how all of that is organized. So, we've had several presentations with them because they're basically two companies in one now, and having some of that information. And most recently, just last month. Also, Therapy Box, we've had Rebecca here twice to talk about predictable and seen and heard, and talking about some of the gaming aspects the last time that she was here, just last month, and really looking at it. One of the nice things that Rebecca, and there was somebody else that was presenting with her too, they talked about how they, like many of the companies, have availability for if you're doing assessments, that they can do loaner periods of times with their apps as well.
And she likes to give away free licenses when you go to her presentation. So that's always nice. We like that.
And of course, we've had Toby Dynavox. Blair and Sarah were here to talk to us about TD Snap. They've been at the conference live presenting. And so we hope, to bring them back in the future too, because we know there's new things that are happening with Toby. And then of course, and I, Deb has put in the chat, if you haven't seen it, that Echo planned, here Echo Voices, planned not to talk about tools in the early years, but people do get stuck there. And forget that tools are not just most successful without the support. So So we're always looking at how are people providing the supports around it. So this spring, Chandra's had people, they've had people present on emergency preparedness, looking at speech generating device funding, and data-driven AAC program, and how people are kind of putting their programs together. And as you can see, we put a little star on Melissa and Claire's presentation because that is one that people they got a lot of information, a lot of forms. I remember because I didn't attend this one live, I watched it. And Chandra was telling me about how many people were downloading their form package.
I could not get that information uploaded fast enough. Claire just kept sending me stuff and I kept uploading it because people were like, please, give me this. Yes, we want this.
Yeah, Claire has so much great information. I was talking with her at the conference last month and she was really excited that people were tuned into and really benefiting from their presentation.
Claire is amazing.
So we know that it isn't just about tools, but we need to have these supports. And as Deb said in the chat, that's why the beginning years were focused on the supports and the services around AAC. So just to kind of to show you again, these are the things that in previous years, and I just did them group them by the years. So looking at what we did this year with emergency preparedness and data collection and funding. Last year, the hot topics, in addition to all of these companies we were focusing on, was Carrie Huddleston talking about behavior supports and using AAC with individuals who need communication as a part of their challenging behavior services. And we all need communication, and we know that behavior is a communication, and Carrie does a really nice job of pulling that together.
That was a big one.
Yeah, that's another one that people go and watch and rewatch. We also had, because funding, changes and funding, different sources of funding. So there was a presentation on Medicaid services and eligibility related to assistive technology and AAC.
We did recently get an update from them as well.
Yes, so that would have been, I'm going to go back.
From the Jennifers. We call them the Jennifers. They clarified that the Oregon Medicaid system does not cover apps, just devices, but that their policy analysts are looking to see if that can be changed, because they do believe that should be something that is covered under Medicaid.
And of course, that's why many of the companies that we work with have those packages. So if they are a company that does an AAC app, that they package them and essentially lock that into an iPad or a tablet. That's kind of the whole premise behind why some like AbleNet has that whole wing of that puts products together. But each of the companies does that as well, because it wasn't just Oregon that was issue. So as we look at the previous years where the focus was mostly on services, we had the 22-23 school year really looking at partners and communication partners, the different roles, how to do training with parents. There was a lot of things that were focused on consumers themselves, their families, looking at young AAC users. We looked at, Heidi talked about coaching aspects with communication partners. Sarah had a really interesting presentation on consent in the classroom. So looking at AAC use and the information that's shared back and forth. Continuing out that year, Krista Howard is an AAC user who presents, and she's in the process of getting her speech therapy assistant degree so that she's pushing forward what she knows about communication and language with those children that she serves. We had Barbara and Harris and Pam Harris talk about the family coaching. That was one of the assistive wear focused presentations. Kelly Key and all of her, she's just always filled with so many ideas about how they in her school system in Illinois increase family involvement. So we had a lot of things on family and advocacy. Paige talked about executive functioning, right? So there was a lot of those partner focused issues in that particular group of videos that you can get. The previous year in 21-22, we focused a lot on assessment and this whole idea of matching not just features, but also matching implementation programs was the focus of my presentation that year. We had Gloria Soto talk about the cultural aspects, and she has a huge program out of her university in California that focuses on supports for dual language speakers and AAC. We also had, well, I think one of the presentations I've watched more than once is Cole and Donnie, who are autistic adults that use AAC and talk very practically about what things helped them and what things did not help them as they were learning to use their AAC systems and the advocacy that they are doing for people who use AAC. We had focus on vocabularies. Gail Van Tatenhove talking about data collection that's within systems. She's probably my number one go-to person on language sampling and data. Gail and Beth talked about looking at working together and the issues of conflict and how we work through that when that happens within a team and within supports. So we had presenters that talked about, that whole team building process, getting on the same page, utilizing peer supports. I think Laura Hayes' presentation on stimming, like are people stimming with their AAC systems, was so interesting. It was a whole different perspective on what people may be doing who are saying words repetitively. And then also looking at statewide or looking at district-wide systems with Mike Cole and with Irene, talking about how they did that within the programs that they work. Anyway, we just keep climbing back the years. In 2021, Gail started out with that, talking about AAC and building routines around it. We had emergency planning. This was a really heavy year on implementation, right? Because that's what people were, we have this, but what do we do with it? And how do we get people started? And looking at different models like participation models, looking at teaching people how to model and prompt through products, processes like the MasterPal, and looking at what do we need, what are we looking at when individuals are really communicating motorically, are looking at communicating with what they have in their own body and building that into their AAC system with Jane Corsten and Every Move Counts. And of course, Terry was here and you'll see as we look back at 2019, 2020, we had Terry talking about all of her breadth of knowledge with AAC and looking at some of the supports like the online supports of Core Word Classroom. Chris Gibbons was talking about, because we were in 21, And so people were doing therapy and still doing some things remotely. So Chris talked about those remote supports. I still teach remotely, so I'm still drawing upon Chris's information. We'll talk about a little bit more about my low-tech AAC system because that was also building a feature match. And then looking at just engaging people using music, using stories, how to present if you're an AAC user, how to present. David McNaughton talked about transitioning individuals from the school system to work and home and community. And then in the first year, Kim launched the whole project off. Carol Zangari talked about all of the resources that are there in practical AAC. That, and, as I'm going through this, I'm like, oh, check. That's another one we should look at an update repeat. Of course, Emily was here from Oregon Health and Science talking about the communication matrix and other assessment tools that they have. Sarah Blackstone talked about the social skills network. So a lot of information on assessment, right, was found in that first year. How to assess access, looking at matching needs to tools, looking at that PAL process, looking at report writing. So many of those pieces, again, sorting through devices and apps. Looking at the CSI-CY is another assessment measure that's built off of the children and youth measures. And then Phil talked about different resources for service providers, and we wrapped that year up. So it's been, several years of building this content. As Chandra mentioned, all of it's available on YouTube. That's linked to it. They've been putting the links here into the chat for you so that you can go and see these individual presentations, share them with others, again, build on your knowledge.
And I would say also that a lot of these videos have comprehension quizzes linked in the descriptions in the YouTube channel, as well as in the archives. So once you've watched it, you can still get your contact hour credits once you complete the comprehension quiz. And if there is a video that does not have a comprehension quiz attached to it, and that's the case for some of the older videos, let me know if there's a particular one that you want, and I will make that happen for you.
Excellent. So this is our chance to hear, again, another chance here for us to hear from you about if these sessions have been meeting your needs. Are there additional companies that we should invite to share? What topics should we be exploring for other presenters? So I'm going to quit out of the presentation and just open up here to see what people are thinking.
Really love to hear from Judith all the way in Hawaii. What are your guys's hot topics in Hawaii besides like surfing? I really want to do that. I want to go surfing, scuba diving.
Hey, Judy.
You're muted.
Actually, right now we're in the process of revising our guidelines. And so one of the things is once that's done is I want to specifically target, the AAC, assessment and, things like that. And then let's see, the report writing. But one of the things that pops up is the funding. So and also I think Hawaii is the only statewide system. So it's a state and local EA. And my supervisor was asking because some schools pay for the AT device, and sometimes it's the district, pays for it. So then there's that inequity. And so because we do have loan banks within our district, they borrow it sometimes. Well, anyway, basically who should pay, especially since with the federal funds may not be available, in the future. And so I told her that probably be better for the district rather than at the school level. Then especially if a student transitions from one school to a different school within that district, then you have that, the continuity. You don't have that thing. But I was just wondering how other districts do things in terms of, they have a loan library, the funding, and was that something that was already discussed? Because this is my first time attending, what is it, the Echo Voices.
Yeah. So for both of those funding presentations that we had, that just like what, 3 months ago, 2 months ago, that they talked about it, and then last year they talked about things from Medicare and Medicaid. Now, of course, they're going to be specific to Oregon,
Mhm.
in a lot of what they present, but people also have, it's kind of all of the things that you've mentioned. Most states have a mix of, not every state has a loan bank.
Mhm.
Many do. And if that is, probably their biggest chunk of money in their loan bank goes into the AEC products that are there.
Mhm.
And some people take advantage of loaners directly from companies,
Mhm.
what can happen, right? But with the funding piece, again, it's tied, it differs state to state. But I think maybe one of the things to focus on is talking with the company representatives too. That's one thing I always encourage people to do, is that each of the major manufacturers in Agacom, have people on staff that's their full-time job to help us with funding.
Mhm.
So they are always the people that are my go-to people, because they're always up on it, because of course their livelihood depends upon it.
Mhm.
And so they always seem to be more tuned in to
Mhm.
what's happening. Although I'm going to open it up and see if other people that are here want to contribute to that. But I think you'd benefit from seeing especially the one that just happened a couple months ago.
Okay, because I know we do contact like the different AAC vendors, and then they've been wonderful in terms of like, oh, here you can we'll ship off a device so that you can trial and evaluate and things like that. Um, and then I guess we're slowly trying to build up our library because of course we don't. It's totally up to the parents, if they choose to get their own personal one. We don't want to, push toward their insurance, and unless they're approaching their aging out, then we do want to help be supportive to the parents so they have something once they leave the DOE.
Yeah, that transition piece is really important.
I would just call out Blair. We have Blair Sellers here from Toby Dynavox. And I know that she's talked about how Toby helps with the funding piece.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, Blair.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, we have a full funding department that works behind the scenes, and we have a new program called the Funding Coach. So I can put some information about that in the chat. It's kind of like one-on-one mentorship through the whole funding process, from evaluation, device trials, mounting recommendations, access method recommendations, all of those complexities. And talking you through kind of every step of the way, and they review the report before it's submitted, and kind of coach you on that whole process. So I can put a little info about that in the chat here. It's a great program for especially SLPs writing their first AAC funding report, because it really is helpful. And then afterwards, after you've written your first, we have a funding team that works behind the scenes and helps with that insurance piece. And they're still available, but it's a little bit less like one-on-one coaching, unless you're doing that funding coach program. But I'm
Thank you.
happy to answer any questions about that too.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's such a helpful service. And as Blair said, for that first time, for the
Mhm.
first time you go through, it's so overwhelming, and then you start to get the hang of it, and then of course rules change. Uh, but yeah, please put that in the chat for people to grab. Are there any other topics that people are interested in? I mean, we've gone through a lot with assessment and partner and implementation strategies, but are there other presenters or speakers that you're interested in or that you've heard that you think that we should be thinking about?
I always hear rumblings of the bilingual AAC, and I've taken a couple of those trainings. And so I'm wondering, is that something that you guys want to see brought to Echo Voices?
So we had what Gloria Soto probably 3 years ago now.
It's been a little while, yeah. And so I have that on my list to explore. But I really want to make sure that I'm targeting what you guys are wanting. We have a very quiet group here this morning.
Well, we'll take you out of the higher pressure situation and jump back in. Please put in the chat as you think of things or people's names. So we just wanted to bring to you here a little 15 minutes of what we talked about last month at the conference. This whole idea of where feature matching fits in, because a lot of people talk about feature matching, but then they don't really dig into what that is. And that's what we've been trying to do over these 2 years, is looking at the AAC product lines and looking at what is their input methods, what is their processing, that language representation and how language is represented. What do you get as a result? You know, the voice output, connection to other systems. I have kids that use their AAC system as their writing tool. And then what are all those other features? So we have the Echo Voices spreadsheet. If I stop sharing, Chandra, do you have yours up? And
Can have it up.
all right, I'm going to stop sharing. So we're going to, Chandra's put the link into the master. You can take a look at it yourself as well. We'll pop it up here so you can see all of the components. Chandra and I started, this was our big to do 2 summers ago. We started with the layout from Boston Children's Hospital and their AAC department with their group and all the things that they were doing with when they're a part of their assessment and the features that they look at. And so we started with those groups. And so down the left-hand side, you'll see purpose and the platform that it's in, the different kinds of vocabulary, the language layouts. In the purple is the voice output. You know, what are we getting there? What kind of voices? Looking at the different kinds of speech settings that a product might have. Looking at the symbols, what types of symbols come with it, what are the things that are capable. We looked at the display and what does the display look like, and you know, the different features of the display, symbol, text, those types of things, split screen.
And
Looking at the different display settings, not just things like size and color, but orientation, magnification. We looked at different feedback. So as you're using this, as a consumer is using the system, do they get any type of tactile, auditory feedback? Not just what comes the output. And rate enhancements, symbol prediction, letter prediction, those types of things. And then got into the whole physical access component. So the big section here on access motor skills, the kinds of features that if you're on a flat screen, being able to drag, those types of things. If it's scanning, what types of scanning. And then those other human factors of what kind of support and all those other things that influence our choices, the type of support you get from the company, what kinds of things that are built in or needed for transporting that AAC system. And then there's all the other miscellaneous that tends to come up while the presenters, while we've had the manufacturer representatives present, Chandra's pulling out all these kind of other features, web authoring, adding visual schedules. So as you can see, all of those things on the left are the big areas of features broken into smaller. And this is our big challenge in AAC is the terminology. Like every company wants to call rate enhancement something different, right? And so we get challenged by that, and our presenters have been challenged because we might have had one term on the form and their company uses a different term. So then going across the top, and I think this really is just an order of presentation, right? Is that you'll see the companies and the products, and these were done by the representatives of those companies, right? And they are the people that Chandra reaches out to. We just asked them in end of March, early April, right around conference time, to take a look and do some updating for us. And so you see that we just kind of add as we have a company present, and their presenters go through this process and add to it. And we really appreciate it. We know it's a lot of work, but I think it's beneficial that you can say, okay, we're looking at something that is for expressive communication, something that is going to go on, an iPhone. So what kind of tools might work on an iPhone? And you can look across and do that. So that's the purpose of this big project that we have. It was a big undertaking to start it off, but we're going to try our very best with the help of the manufacturer representatives to keep it going. All right, I'm going to grab the screen again from you, Chandra. So that's where that link takes you. So all of these different categories, and just, so that we are thinking about, how can somebody access it? Is it, how is language organized? What terms are that company using and how words are put together? What type of editing? Because it isn't just about putting communication out. It's also about being to edit and repair communication while you're putting your message together, as well as maybe after your message is out and somebody didn't understand. And that, if I think back to Donnie's presentation, he talked about repair. How does he repair conversation when people don't understand what his intended meaning was? And then how do we deal with it when the situation arises when a message isn't available? And you'll see different things that companies have as a part of their vocabulary set. And then, of course, the output. And that's why you see so much there in the features of that feature match matrix about not just auditory output, but what is the visual that we get out? Does it have tactual output? One of the tools that we learned about from Adaptivation is that they have a switch that has vibration built into it. So looking at that type of output for people that might need some types of tactual cueing. And then when we talk about human factors, all those other influencers, like what color is it? I have a kid that if it's not purple, she's not going to use it, right? Like everything has to be purple. Her wheelchair is purple. Her device is in a purple case. Everything had to be purple. They wrapped her device mount in purple tape. I mean, she's a purple child. But then things like loaners. Judith was talking about the companies that have loaners. Some of the time of those companies, the money that you might put into a loaner goes towards renting to buy it. And all of the other training support, like the support that Blair talked about, that Toby Dynavox has for supporting you through the assessment, writing up putting in for the funding, and having somebody read your report before it goes in for funding is like priceless. The other thing I like to always draw people's attention to when it comes to human factors is the work from Dr. Tom King, who worked was the AAC specialist or the professor that taught about AAC at the University of Wisconsin-Eau Claire. Tom also had a sister who used assistive technology and augmentative communication. So he was in both a family role as well as a practitioner role. But he talks about human factors as the companies who make our other types of appliances, your stove, your washing machine, and these are the human factors that they relate. Where are the switches and the buttons on? And he relates this back to AAC. I often find that these are the make it break it. So when we have issues around abandonment, which remembering abandonment is one of our biggest problems in augmentative and alternative communication, it often falls into one of these 10 categories of why something was abandoned. As we wrap up our session here, we also want you to know that there are other resources out there. In my presentation from, I don't know, 2-3 years ago, and this keeps up, the companies keep this up too, is a listing of the features of portable, low-tech AAC systems, non-robust vocabulary systems, often supplemental systems that we do training on, systems that become classroom systems. But we looked at the big categories of those as being the portability, the size, the number of buttons, the number of levels and the types of functions that tool has, the sound that comes out, and some of the other things that are about programming and operation. And so that goes through several companies worth of products. Other resources for you, as I mentioned, Chandra and I worked on the OTAP feature match matrix, starting with this one in the upper right from Boston, from the Boston Children's Hospital, that you can still link to. They've got some nice case studies. If you're looking for that, you can go to the Children's Hospital link that we've got down here, and it'll take you through their AAC case studies. I'm a big fan of Call Scotland, which is a project out of the University of Edinburgh, where they have not just in AAC, but they have for areas of literacy. They also have an eye gaze curve example and really great support. So you'll see the links to the Call Scotland posters and leaflets, which is this kind of circle diagram where they look at the main features in the middle and then just keep breaking it down. Now, these do only relate to AAC apps, right? So you have to, as you're looking at resources, see if they're covering dedicated devices as well as the non-dedicated AAC apps. Other resources that we use, we had Carol Zangari present on the practical AAC. And if you just go in there and do feature matching, you'll find links to videos and forms and other presentations that people have done. My go-to tech person in the world of AAC apps is the amazing Angela Morad, where she is constantly looking at feature matching. If you think that our feature match matrix that we've done for OTAP is busy, woohoo! You have not looked at the amazing one. She has huge minutia details and then she'll look at specific categories of apps, the text-based apps altogether, the visual scene apps altogether, the pragmatic vocabulary apps altogether, the core word-based apps altogether. She does, and so for most of the things that we've been talking about here have been free. There are charges so that you know there is a charge for some of getting the basic feature match matrix, but then your updates to that are free. So you'll find her information at her website as well as on Teacher Pay Teacher. And then as we just some things to remind you about, bringing back information from the assessment year that we did. And many of you are in tune to the SET framework from Dr. Joy Zabala. We are in the 35th year of the SET framework. We've got some examples of things that people have done, and you'll see examples in some of those 2019, 2020 presentations of how people have used it. This is an example from one of my students. We're looking at bringing the SET framework and gathering that information about the student, the environment, and their tasks, and then leading you up to a blank feature match where you're looking at what are your tool possibilities and your descriptors. So here's an example of, this is an example from one of my students of what I do is we work together to look at what are the features that are needed, what questions might we have, because we don't always know all the answers. Sometimes we're trying to find out the answers while we're going through the assessment and trial process. For this particular student, they had a Go Talk 20 and we were looking at other products and then looking at what does that product have? You know, does it have that? Does it, I always love the, it depends. And if you modify it, it could have it. And then don't forget to have the importance of trials, you know, getting loaners, what are you trying to determine, the data, and you can look back at those presentations from Gail Van Tatenhove and others on data collection and how they do that and how the companies, the internal data from that. And then lastly, as we wrap up, don't forget about the borrowing of equipment. Chandra, things you have to say about the Oregon process?
Yes. Okay. So, sorry. Here is another place where we need your feedback. I want to stock this library with the things that you guys need. So, just tell me what you need. You know, tell me what you need. What is going to save
An email if you're an Oregonian.
Yeah. What's gonna save you the most money? You know, because that's what we're here for, right? We are here to save you guys time and money. And if you have not already used the loan library, we have the catalog housed in the Roseburg Public Library website. And so you can always just go to that site and type in OTAP and it'll give you everything that's on our list. And I've also posted the link in the chat for you. And if you don't see something that you want on there, just email me. It could be that I have it in a closet somewhere. It could be that we go out and get it for you. We need to know what you need. You know, what are your thoughts and your ideas? And we do occasionally get people that say, hey, I heard about this thing. Do you have one of those? And we have gone out and purchased one or facilitated a trial through the company that makes it. So if you have questions about it, how to use it, there's a relatively simple form that you fill out and email to me, and then I will ship it out at OTAP's expense. We do ask that you pay to return it or drop it off at my desk in the office. That's okay too. I love to meet people. And we do 45-day trials approximately. We're not going to come and like take it from you at 45 days. So if there's nobody else that needs it, you just call me or email me and say, hey, I need to extend it. And I'm like, yeah, sure. Well, let me know how long you need it. So we're not going to take a kid's voice away ever. That's not going to happen. So, but we can also help you get in touch with the people that you need to be in touch with to help get it funded and find other resources for you. So that's pretty much it.
Yeah, and remember, not every state has a loan program. And I think that sometimes the states that that do have them don't get the credit that they should, or does everybody always know about it? So if you're one of the folks that are joining from another state, another location, check. Don't just assume that it's not there. It might be there and it's not being used. We do know of I do know of two states that stopped their loan program because the loan program stopped being used. And people and some of it was because people just didn't even know it existed. So check that out. Make sure that you're taking advantage of those services that are there at your state level. So as we wrap up, we appreciate that you've joined us here on our final 24-25 presentation. I've got a growing list, and Shonda's got a list of things like guidelines, funding, report writing, loan banks, bilingual education, device abandonment. And we'll go through the chat to see what else maybe you've added. Please continue to send information to Chandra. And then that way, when we get into planning for next year, we'll be building it off of your input. And that's the same even if you're not with us live. If you are watching this afterwards, please send in your ideas to her. We greatly appreciate that. Because we can pick topics that entertain us, but that doesn't mean it's what you need.
I'm not an SLP, so I find it all interesting at this point. Don't let me drive what you guys need.
Well, if that's not the best advertisement for putting in your 2 cents, I don't know what else there is. But we really do thank you. We hope to see you continued online. And I'm going to turn it back to Chandra.
All right. I think that's a wrap, Kelly.
All right. We are done with 24-25. Thanks, everybody.
All right. Bye.